Hello, my name is William, the Avid reader, and today I'm reviewing A Clergyman's Daughter, written by George Orwell in 1935. So this is George Orwell's second novel and his third book, and it's about 300 pages long, so it's a quite short book, and the letters are pretty big. And there are 5 sections in this book, you could say. So one's about the clergy lifestyle for a woman, one's about how hop picking works, so in the fields. The third chapter is about how city poverty works and things like that. Fourth chapter is about the private schooling system, and the final chapter is where everything comes around the conclusion of the story. So before I go on, there will be spoilers in this review. So you have so the first chapter, it's a clergyman's daughter, about a clergyman's daughter. So here we see her lifestyle, and the protagonist of the story is called Dorothy, and she works for her father, called for barely any wages, called the rector of the church. He's a clergyman. He's a very self-centered, rude person who hates a lot of things, and Dorothy has to do a lot of horrible things, like she has to rob some old lady's thing, and she has to participate in a lot of things, and do this make these checkbooks for plays and things like that. And we get to meet some of the main characters, like Mr. Warburton. So he's this friendly middle-aged bachelor who says God doesn't exist. He's also very promiscuous. Then you also get to see Mrs. Sempril, which is this gossiper who makes up a bunch of horrible things in this little town of Knipe Hill. But after we've seen the daughter's lifestyle, she gets suddenly amnesia, and she finds herself on the Kent Road, and she goes hop picking with a new friend of her called Nobby, who's a petty thief, and he's a vagrant, and they do some hop picking for a while. Then he gets arrested, and we learn that hop picking is something people do as a vacation, but it's not really a fun one, so people are glad when they come home to work. After she goes hop picking, she goes to London. She forgot for most of the hop picking who she was, and went on a different name, but when she realized what was happening, she soon stopped working. When she stopped working at the hop picking, she went to London, and there she dwelt on city poverty, how it is. She went to Trafalgar Square, which is the worst part of the book, I would say, because it's a lot of decent moments and okay moments, but then there are really mediocre or bad moments, and there are some good moments in this book. But one of the worst one is the poverty scene in Trafalgar Square. It's just 20 pages of dialogue, and I mean, sure, but when I read an Orwell book, I don't want to read a theater piece. So yeah, there are some bad things about this book. And then she finds this cousin of hers, this aristocrat called Sir Thomas, because they're all part of the Harris family. So there's a bunch of aristocrats, and he helps her find a job under a different surname at the private school. And here we can see Orwell's hatred for a private school system, because he thinks it's all about greed and things like that. And I would say this part of the book, even if it might be exaggerated, is the best part, where we see she's a teacher, and all the students have barely been learning anything, because all the teacher is you have to, at private school, they made you at the time in England copy a bunch of things and some basic math, but otherwise they knew nothing. And yeah, there was some mentally challenged child there also, and there were 21 students, and you hit students if if their parents don't pay enough for school and things like that. So she changes up the school system and starts teaching a better way. So instead of making the students learn the list of capitals of the British counties, she makes a map with the students. But then here we see how the parents can screw up the education of children by getting themselves involved, and they say they're not happy with the teacher putting all these ideas in them, reading Macbeth, and it's like they shouldn't ask questions and things like that. They're like, they want their kids indoctrinated, and basically they don't want to have children that are smarter than them. So it's quite horrible section, and we see here the horribleness of the proprietress of the private school called Mrs. Creevy, and she's average really much, and she really likes inflicting pains of it. That's the only pleasure. So accumulating money, and she was right, instead of earning it through an honest way, so She just tries to do these shortcuts, cutthroats per type of person. Dorothy gets fired, but just as she gets fired, she meets up with in section 5 with Mr. Warburton. Helps her out and proposes marriage for her, but she refuses. So she returns to being Clergyman's daughter. Keep in mind she has lost her faith here. It's weird. This book is not really a. This story comes full circle. It's the least tragic of his Orwell's novels maybe, except it coming up forever. But here this ending is not really a negative one because she comes back to point zero. She's gone like this. So it's a weird story, and yeah. So 5 sections. So how would I rate the Clergyman's Daughter? So this book, unfortunately, is the worst book so far I've read of George Orwell. I'm very disappointed with this book. So the first chapter is decent on the clergy lifestyle. The hop picking is it's kind of decent to okay. The city poverty and that dialogue paragraph is really a horrible, boring scene. But the 4th chapter, that's a good best part of the book. It's only good part maybe, or private. We see the private school system that's explained, and we see how Dorothy wants to make her life work to teach students well, but she can't because of the system, which presses down on her. And then we get to full circle, chapter 5, where we see how this is only a okay book. So yeah, I would rate this book 6 out of 10. So yeah, as I've said, there are moments that are bad, there are moments that are good, but most of the moments are okay. So yes, Clergyman's Daughter, not sure that I would recommend it. I mean, I would recommend chapter 4. That's a good chapter, that's a good section, and it's the largest section of the book. I think it's about 80 pages. But yeah, you're gonna read this for, what, 10 hours? Spend 10 hours reading this? Is that worth it? I'm not really sure that's worth one time. So this is George Orwell. This was a disappointing, and it's interesting because even George Orwell says that if you see the preamble of the book here, he says that he didn't like this book and he wanted basically destroyed. The only reason he kept this in print was because, well, I don't care, he wants money for his kids. So yeah, he said this and Keep the Aspria Flying were not good books. So yeah, he can suffer. Even he knows when he's done something bad. So that's good. So George Orwell, you wrote an okay book. I hope your next books are better. I mean, your previous books have been good so far. So yeah, I hope he keeps up the good writing in the 1930s. So this was the Avid Reader's review of A Clergyman's Daughter, written by George Orwell in 1935. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys next time.